Captain's Log Supplemental.
Hey Jeremy, you know those race cars you're busy building?
Yeah, I do. I
You,
got one
you,
that I'm looking at every day.
you know what I don't see you working on?
You don't see me working on the amazing Sentinel system yet.
That's true. It would take all of 10 minutes for you to have one.
And it's very quick and easy to install.
It is. It is. And we could watch you when we are not at the race with you and see how you're doing. And then we can call you up when you get out of the car and tell you everything you did wrong.
And I love that because so many years I've been driving and not been able to see what I'm doing.
I know.
And now we can.
I know. You know what I'd like to do with the video? My most favorite thing is I take the video and I load it on YouTube and then I send it to my coach and say, look at 26 minutes and 17 seconds. Look at this one lap and tell me what I can do better. And every single time, you know what they say?
Everything.
Exactly. Precisely. So with the Sentinel system, you get instantaneous feedback plus useful feedback that unfortunately is accurate for my driving.
I think it's accurate for all of our driving.
Pretty much. Yeah, that's probably true. Yep. But you need to get one in your car, sir.
Yes, I do. And with the discount code that you're going to tell everybody, they can save 10% on this awesome system.
Yep. Trouble free. I haven't had an issue getting video every time we've gone out with the Sentinel. It's always worked. Can't say the same for some of the other systems we've tried. So I don't know. It's on the podcast notes down there. Don't do it while you're driving, though. We like to have our listeners live. It's good.
From the great halls of their house, there are assembled three who hope to one day be the world's greatest driving heroes. Created from the cosmic legends of the universe comes our team captain, the Vision, Bill Fisher, and their soon-to-be Wonder Woman, Vicki Fisher, and our Captain Marvel and head flight trainee, Jennifer Skripchuk. Their mission: to fight injustice, share what is right and wrong, to get you out of your house and come out racing with them and serve all mankind. They are the Garage Heroes in Training Team.
Welcome to the Garage Heroes in Training Podcast. I'm going to be one of the hosts for this episode, starting off 2025. My name is Bill. Who else is hosting?
I'm Vicki.
Miss Vicki, this is our first episode that we're recording in the 2025.
It is. It is.
So I thought we could start this off by doing one of our famous, to us at least, specific race car type episodes. And I thought, there's this car out there that everybody seems to race and it does really, really well. And after 2 years of dominating GLTC, I was like, who can I know who knows just a little bit about Corvettes? And I said, I know a guy. He's been on before. One of our favorites, Mark Petronis. Welcome back to the podcast, sir.
Hello, guys. Happy New Year. Proud to be leading it off for 2025. Hopefully, I don't embarrass anybody or myself.
No. The only time you embarrass us is when you pass us on the NASA Northeast days.
Well, listen, I'm driving a Corvette, so that's
so there's that.
I mean, you know, I put up a good fight in my Honda Fit that one time, but somehow you made it by me. I don't know.
Right.
It was tough, but now I think you've passed all of our cars for now, so it's fine. Some of them are actually, I think you had to try, like they only had one foot sticking out the side. It was fine.
Okay.
So, Mark, you know a little bit about Corvettes. I know a little bit about Corvettes. Miss Vicki,
not so much.
She can say Corvette, I think, pretty much. But if we were to hit her with the C1, C2, all the way through C8,
nope,
not a clue.
Not my platform.
so let's pretend that some of our listeners might be Miss Vicki. So if you were to go back and go through the pedigree, I don't think C1s and maybe C2s are going to be raced right now because pricing. But you know, what would you? How would you characterize the progression from the beginning?
Well, I'll be 100% honest with you. Most of my knowledge starts at the C5. Why is that? that's when Corvette actually got really good. The C1, C2, obviously the 53. You're not going to see any of those around. The C2, the Stingrays. I've never seen anything of that vintage at the track. I've seen a couple of C3s, but there's better ways, cheaper ways, faster ways to go faster around a track than a C3 Corvette. C4, I've seen quite a few C4s, and the biggest problem with the C4 is that it's not a C5.
Yeah.
They threw everything out they do with the C4. They lengthened the wheelbase. I mean, the C4 is a little bit more nimble, I guess some might say, but they are, the cuts below the C5. But the C5 changed everything, certainly with the Corvette platform. And a lot of people took what they were doing with the C5 and transferred it to their own platform, the double wishbone suspension and stuff like that. So really pretty ahead of its time. And they did that. The C5 and the C6 are nearly identical cars. I mean, the frame's the same, the suspension's the same, the control arm's the same. They changed the body panels and, of course, freshened up the motors over the generations. But, C5 and C6 being mostly the same. C7 took certainly the same, not, all new parts, but very same design criterias and, the way the frame is built, the way the suspension is attached. And, of course, not until the C8 did we flip everything on its head and go to the mid-engine platform, which is what I'm currently driving. But raced the C5 for years. Developed the hell out of that platform. My company, AMT Motorsports, makes all Corvette stuff for everything from C5 through C8. But chances are, if you're going to be at the racetrack, you're going to see a Corvette, it's probably going to be a C5 or a C6 because those are the most plentiful, most affordable, most attainable, easiest to put on the track with the least amount of investment and have a lot of fun and be fast.
So, hopeful friend of the podcast in the future, Matt Farah, always has this rule about Corvettes when he's talking mostly for road cars. He's like, buy the newest one you can afford. Is that the same if we were talking for track?
I don't think so. Not anymore. I mean, this conversation has been coming up a lot because NASA's coming out with their Corvette Cup series, which they've got some pretty neat. It's not. There's another Corvette series called Spec Corvette, which has to be a C5 Corvette. However, NASA Corvette Cup is going to allow C5 and C6. So I get a lot of when we had a PRI, we had a big party at our place, and Jeremy, the CEO of NASA, came over. We were talking about all this. I have a lot of Corvette centric people in my life, so this conversation is always coming up. But if you're really trying to put something on the track, so specifically for track, dedicated track car, if you will, or like this sole function in life is to be on the track, then I'm generally at this point going to steer people towards a C6 because the C5 and C6, while being very similar, a lot of the parts for the C5 were phased out years ago. Some rather important stuff you really can't get anymore. It's not quite the same with the C6. So you got a little bit more support from the OE, from the aftermarket for the C6, just a little newer platform. And we can get into the nitty gritty, and I'm sure we will, but you got dry sumps available for the C6 that you don't have for the C5. So for me, one track car or one Corvette to rule them all, most fun, most reliable, affordable-ish, I'm going to go with C6.
Okay. So I guess if you are looking to do a C5, you're probably going to have to go through the parts car type program.
You mean like own a second car for parts?
Well, I mean, I've seen people do it. I mean,
Not so much. I don't hear a lot about that with C5. I mean, like I said, it's super well supported in the aftermarket, but stupid, things like power steering racks. They can't get an OE version of that anymore. So you have to buy a remanufactured one, and they got little nuances and intricacies about where they leak from the wires, or how the axle boots, the seals go on, things like that.
Okay.
And that's so it all exists. You can get any parts you need, but it might not be the same factory quality that you used to be able to get 10 years ago from the C5. So no, it's not a prerequisite that you own two C5s if you're going to track or race.
I mean,
how difficult is it getting parts for the vehicle?
How difficult?
Yeah,
that's not difficult
and
at all.
Sourcing.
Everything's available, like I'm saying, but some of the top of the line OE, like for whatever reason, GM, their subsidiary AC Delco, they phased out the ball joints. You cannot buy a ball joint from GM or AC Delco anymore for 1997 up till 2014. I have a direct line to their factory where they get them made in Korea, of all places, so I still get them. But like, you go open up a GM parts catalog and call it a dealer, they're not going to get you that part anymore.
Yeah,
so
Honda's the same way.
Yeah. So you can find them, and there's people like myself who know where most of this stuff is. But back to Bill's point, we're not in a situation here where we got to have two cars to be able to run one on.
Right.
Okay, so it's inconvenience, but not impossibility, because like the E30s and some of the older 944s, things like that. The early 80s, like maybe the C4, I guess, might fall in that condition, but they're starting to get to the point where unobtainium in some cases. So you have a second car just because I need parts.
100%. Yeah, I would say we're not there with the Corvette quite yet.
Okay, cool. All right, so I think when we first started talking, well, talking in quotes on the internet and texting each other back and forth, I don't remember if we used Facebook or Instagram or email. I don't remember. I talked to too many people. I said that I was thinking we should do like at least two different types of cars, mostly aiming at track. That there's differences between track and autocross, endurance racing, and things like that. But we should probably do the best bang for the buck type build or theory and the starting point, and then what you got to do to get it to be well behaved, high performing, and reliable. And then I won the lottery. I haven't been able to say that in real life yet. But if I won the lottery, what do I do? And besides have somebody build it for me,
Sure.
So let's go to the first one because that's more realistic, and I don't see the lottery because you need to play the lottery to win the lottery, and we don't.
These are the guys that come and say, you know what? I want to race a Corvette. I don't know where I'm going, so I need to start somewhere.
Well, that's again, are we using race in quotes or are we using HPDE?
Well, we know that they're going to be HPDEing and they're going to transition into racing.
Kind of towards the direction, maybe they started in HPD, but they're going to end up racing. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, again, we just got to start here, but C5, C6 for sure. C7, well, I'm trying to jump ahead. Budget, money, no object. C7 is really cool, and we can talk about that later. But that's because the electronics are super advanced. I mean, you have to throw a ton of money, and I know guys who can do it at a C7 to make it like the most balls race car you can possibly think of. But again, we haven't won the lottery quite yet.
Not yet.
So the guy who works for me, Alex, he's getting ready to buy a Corvette as well, which is super cool. So we can develop some parts for I have the C8, but we can develop things again. Things we maybe overlooked for the C5, C6. I'm pushing him very specifically towards a C6 LS3. And what we're really looking for is a C6 Grand Sport. That for me is the Mac Daddy of a trackable Corvette, affordable, reliable, robust platform. It's got the wide body front and rear fenders on it, so you can put any size tire you want on there. Very common would be like a 315 front, 345 rear. You don't need to make any body modifications to do that. It has a steel frame, so installing a cage on it is much more affordable than a Z06 aluminum frame car. Comes with a dry sump with the LS3 motor. The LS3 is probably the most reliable LS motor that Chevy's ever made. They're a dime a dozen.
Still,
yeah, they still make them. You can open up the GM catalog right now and get one for like $5,800. Like
wow,
a whole thing, like turnkey, like drop it in your car, $5,800. And it used to be, again, going back and forth between the C5 and C6, you can't just drop. You used to be able to get LS6 motors for the C5, which was the Z06 C5. Those used to be a dime a dozen, but they stopped making those years ago. But they're going to make that LS3 probably forever because it goes in all these resto mod things. It's probably the most swapped motor there is right now.
Now, now what year bracket is that in? Mostly, does that work with?
The Grand Sport I'm specifically talking about is 2010 to 2013.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's with the badass dry sump steel frame, wide body, all the aftermarket support you could possibly want. You don't really, when you get to the, again, if we're starting at the track day, high advanced HPD level guy, the dry sump that it comes with is super robust and it doesn't really need to be replaced. Not until you go to crazy huge slicks and ridiculous aero do you need to consider like an aftermarket dry sump. So, if someone's got that thing out of the box, they're driving it 9.5 tenths, it's going to be probably one of the fastest cars on track, and all you got to do is change brake pads and oil.
And one of the things that I think is a benefit of the Corvette platform in general is it's pretty robustly built, almost aimed at racing, and the parts aren't terrible.
Cost-wise, or
yeah, cost-wise. There's no P tax on it, right?
Certainly not a P tax. I wish I made parts for Porsche guys. Those guys will buy. No. I still got to deal with regular blue collar Corvette guys, of which I of course myself identify. So yeah, things don't need to be absurdly expensive for the C6 or for any Corvette, frankly. And when it does get nuts, people call you out on it. So I made titanium lug nuts for, this is a fun little segue. I was making titanium lug nuts, which is ridiculous. I mean, we make US made titanium lug nuts, we roll the threads, I have to sell them for like $450 for a set of four-wheel lug nuts. And you go on Corvette forum or Facebook, it's like, $450 for a set of lug nuts. That's insane. No one's going to buy that, and they laugh at you. And then around that same time, I was researching what Porsche guys were paying for lug nuts, and they'll get on the forums. It's like, I only paid $950 for the set of titanium lug nuts, and really, you look at what went into it, it's a really great deal. I was like, what? You're right. I do got to make Porsche parts. So. Yeah. There's definitely a Porsche tax on Corvette stuff, and you get called out for it when you do. So but it's also nothing like Miatas. Like I look at what you guys spend on Miata parts. I'm like, there's no way I could ever make money making Miata parts. So it's all a scale. It's all a scale.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when they're $400 or $900 or whatever, once they start getting to that level, it really hurts to lose one.
I was embarrassed. I could probably sell some of these things and make some money, but I feel bad you charge me paying $450 for selling that, so I just stopped making them.
Well, that's the key to my track time. It has nothing to do with me weighing well over 200 pounds. I need titanium lug nuts to really get that final tenth.
Precisely.
So I have questions about the Corvette, and I've had them for a really long time. I'm sure other people have too. So the Corvette, the way that as compared to like a standard street car or a standard like endurance car or whatever, we don't really see those very often on the track, probably because they're pricey for whatever reasons. But I'm thinking of
You're talking budget endurance racing, right?
Right, obviously. But what is it with the body balance? Say for instance, like I'm driving a front wheel drive, I have a shorter front end. If I'm driving a BMW, kind of more like centric, and the Miata is a very centered, balanced car. But when I look at the Corvette, I see like all of your weight is in the nose, and you're kind of in the middle, and then there's not a lot of weight on the back unless there is something in the back. I don't know if part of the engine's back there. I don't really know anything too much about Corvettes. How is the balance on the car, and how do you do a setup for that? I've always been curious about that.
Get to impress you because the Corvette actually has perfect 50-50 weight balance because you see that long hood and assume all that weight is there. The engine in the Corvette is actually behind the front wheels.
Okay.
Want to get technical, it's a front mid-engine car because the whole thing is behind the front axle. There's like no weight on the front axle. And, again, this thing came out in 97. Engineers really outdid themselves. They have a torque tube from the car, which then puts the transmission and the differential all the way in the back. So that's where they get the weight in the back of the thing. So, yeah, it looks maybe compared to a Miata, where it looks sort of centralized, the Corvette looks like it's got this super long front end and a short rear. Yeah. Underneath all of that is 50-50 weight distribution.
Right.
So it's funny because my brother's really, really fast in a Miata. He was also really, really fast in my C5. He could hop in both cars and be just nipping out 2/10 within like my lap record pace, jumping out of the two cars. I can't drive his Miata as fast as I can drive a Corvette, but he can drive the Corvette just as fast as almost fast. So transition, the Corvette when it's set up right is just a really fast Miata. That's right.
And you just have okay, all right, because it just has this really long nose on it. That has always been like a curiosity to me. Hold on, let me get my note.
All right, so we got a C6 GTS. Is that right?
GS, technically Grand Sport.
Grand Sport. Sorry, I did the Porsche switch. My bad. So we started out and pretty much out of the box, off the lot. You do your brakes, you do your brake fluid. It's kind of good to go for most, if not all, of your HPD careers. And now we're starting to look at. I've graduated from my HPD, and I'm looking to do either time trials or wheel-to-wheel racing. Somewhere between that and what Ferris Khartoumi is doing with his car, I think is the next step. We'll get the Ferris later, but
Sure. Yeah. So the things that most Corvette people start chucking money at first or removing. It's not so much with the grand sport. Cooling becomes a concern. Transmission cooling, differential cooling. Frankly, I put that more on the race car side. But most of my customers at AMT Motorsport, probably 90% of them are HPDE guys. So what we do, we service mostly that crowd. The last 10% are hardcore race dudes. Ferris is a customer of ours. He's got some of our stuff on his car. So the things that you tend to replace the quickest, one of the things we replace is the rubber control arm bushings, because on the C5, C6, they're quite soft. They flex a bunch. If you can see my hand, here's your wishbone. As you go on a turn, those rubber bushings are flexing. You're losing all your camber. Your bushings can actually extrude themselves through the control arms and just completely screw up your alignment. So we often put them on monoball spherical bearings in the control arms. That way you're not losing any camber. We lock in the camber with a camber kit, which we make. A bunch of other guys make. Essentially, the suspension has a round eccentric, and that round eccentric, while it's infinitely adjustable, it doesn't lock in positively anywhere. So you can overcome that with a lot of torque, really sticky tires on the track. So it's the camber kit's one of the first things that guys do. Monoball suspension doesn't take long as you go down the road, because that really gives you that slot car-like handling that everybody talks about. The car takes a while to set, and it's squishing in all these factory rubber bushings. So removing that and putting metal there is a quick way to get a much better feel for the car. The motor mounts, those are just filled with oil, so those tend to blow up, especially on a car that's 15, 20 years old at this point. So we replace those with semi-solid mounts. Transmission mounts, same thing. And of course, safety is always paramount, as I'll happily tell you about. I was in a really, really bad accident 3 years ago, 85 G's into a tree, and that whole car bent basically around my seat mount that we build in my seat. The cage was destroyed, the car was bent, the frame was toggled in half. But if you look at the aftermath of that thing, the whole car is really bent around this seat. So, and the C6 seat is terrible factory. So putting a race seat in there is one of the first things you do when you get seriously on track also.
Sure. And I think once you go to the spherical type bearings, you're pretty much a race car, not a street car anymore.
I used to tell people that, and I never had, I didn't ever have a Corvette street car with spherical bearings, but now that I have it on my C8, which does have nice magnetic shocks and whatnot to kind of clean out some of those high frequency vibrations. But as long as your suspension's in good working order, it's, yes, you feel them and they're there, but they're not rattling, they're not banging around. In our particular case, we use a very high-end bearing, which I haven't replaced a single customer bearing in the 8 years that we've been making these things. So we use a really high-end thing that's never going to rattle around or loosen up on you. So it's really not, I drive my C8 10,000 miles a year on the street, and it's it's firm, and I got 900-pound springs on it at this point, so it's crazy. But the monoballs really don't induce a lot of extra harshness that you might think it would on the street. So I used to shy people away from that decision, but I say now, hey, if your suspension's in good working order, you can totally drive your car with monoballs on the street without much of an issue at all.
Is that inclusive of Pennsylvania, or is that
I live in upstate New York. So your roads are maybe better than mine.
I don't know.
Pennsylvania just likes taxing to fix the roads. They don't ever fix the roads. They just like taxing for it. So, it's amazing.
So with the Corvette, every car has a strength and a weak, or they have their strengths and their weaknesses, both in driving and both in the physical makeup of the car. What are those for the Corvette?
A fine question. There's not I'm partial. There's not a ton of weaknesses, which is why, every time there ends up being a power to weight class, who do you tend to see in the front of that class? Like you talked about GLTC, aren't they? I'm not super in on what Grid Life is doing. I think they're trying to slow down the Corvettes this year.
I believe there's going to be some Corvette castration. That's just the theory, but
I don't think you're wrong. It's got fantastic CD ratio, so it's super aerodynamic. It's super slippery. You can put massive tires on it. When I was racing in NASA, the BMW dudes would have to spend really expensive wide body kits and flare everything out to stick a 295 or even a 315 tire on those BMWs, where the Corvette just swallows up a 345 like it's not even there. And so I don't know. So I don't think there's a lot of weaknesses, honestly. You can get
structural. What about, like, I know for the BMW that every time we get a BMW, we have to go into where the rear differential is, and we have to secure that whole area up.
Yep.
And for metal fracturing. So
Mhm.
is there anything that's like that new builders might have to go in and say, okay, these are the problem areas that vets usually have, and you want
None
to.
of that. None of that, Vicki. This is American engineering. I'd probably say. I know all about the German stuff, and my buddy DJ, he had a really bad accident. I believe he did, or somebody that he was close to with one of those like R-tab things breaking off at VIR and flip the thing. Yeah.
Mhm.
So and I know what you're talking about, but that type of stuff, like, oh my God, when you get a Corvette, make sure you do this. Those bullet points don't really exist. I guess if you want to get technical and talk about the Z06 with the LS7 motor, it's got valve guides that can wear prematurely, and then the valves can kind of break off and lunch the motor. And and then we haven't talked about the Z06 because it's kind of expensive, and really because of that. If you're going to get a Z06 on track, you kind of have to spend some money to fix the heads on that thing. But besides that, I mean, there's really, there's not a lot of, not a lot of landmines you're getting ready to step on when you get into the Corvette platform, which is probably why they're so damn popular.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, you remember Dewey, who's been on the podcast a few times. He always
Yeah.
says if there's a class in racing that a Corvette can enter, it usually dominates.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then in my time, and with NASA when I was racing an ST2, I mean, yes, anybody with this power and this weight could enter that class. But at its peak, when I was really active, and we were 16 cars on the track, and 14 of them would be Corvettes. You get a Mustang
Yeah.
frontal area, and it's just, yeah, it's a tough thing
Corvettes or BMWs.
to Corvette. Yeah,
Yeah,
100%.
Corvettes or BMWs
Mhm.
is usually what ends up on tracks.
Right.
And your little baby Miata.
Yeah, and little baby
Yeah,
Miatas.
that was always the answer.
It
Yeah.
is. Sometimes.
I went to
Corvette's a better answer,
SCCA.
though.
I went to SCCA and we were doing the challenges, plus the BMWs were out there, and they had the little micro cars and stuff, and they referred to us as bees.
Bees. They sound like the spec Miatas sound like swarm of angry bees.
Yeah, they said this little swarm of bees are coming around.
hmm
Okay.
All right. So we've got the C6 as the cost benefit optimized at this point in time. Uh, just for uh, people going through, the reason we do the C6 versus the C5 is newer and a little bit more support.
Yep.
I have heard, not to the extent of the BMWs, but I have heard, we talked about a little bit, the cooling can be an issue. I
Yeah.
assume they're
When
proven solutions, but
100%. Yeah. I mean, when you get to, again, we're talking track day guys, 90%, and I talk about driving a Corvette, 9/10. You think about what that is, 95%, if you will, of a Corvette's capability to walk into the lane. 203s, right? Under a minute at Lime Rock, 1:15 at Lightning. And these are like aspirational times for pretty much anybody in any other platform, right? So if
right.
you're going fast in a Corvette, I'm doing it with one hand on the wheel and waving to my buddies that doing 202s in my C8. You know what I mean? So
hmm
you think about, running at that level, it's not at all difficult to do. But I guess my point is a lot of guys take a long time to get there, right? I mean, you don't just hop. Guys don't just hop in a Corvette and run 2 minutes at the Glen. But you can be, like I said, 90% faster than 90% of the traffic out there while driving 90% of the capability of the car. It will do that forever. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't have any problems doing that. It's really when you get to that last 5-10% where then we talk about like what we're about to talk about now. What can we do? Well, what does need to be improved? Extracting those last percentage points of performance. Cooling is towards the top of the list. When I was driving my C5, as I was starting to get really, really fast in it, I would go to Watkins Glen in like 3 laps. I get a transmission overheat alarm. It's like, well, great. What am I supposed to do now? Cool down for a lap, get right back into it. Boom, it goes over 300 degrees F. So, the thing about the Corvette, it's got enough electronics in it, just enough electronics to keep things in check. Not so much to like be an overlord at ruining your life all the time. But if you get a transmission overtemp alarm in a Corvette, it's time for a transmission and diff cooler, and they're not that expensive. You probably $600 a side. So $1,200, you've got that transmission and diff cooled down. And once I did that, never got an alarm again. And I would go 6, sometimes 7 seasons on a transmission. And then I never had one blow up. I would just replace them as I wanted to upgrade more than anything else. So keep that stuff in good shape. Engine cooling will become a problem at the last 5%, but as long as if you're not doing crazy aero, with crazy horsepower and stuff like that than a simple, DeWitt's drop in or drop in radiator, and they make them. It's cheap enough, $700-800. That'll take care of 90% of your cooling problems for 95% of the people.
Right. What about I mean, I know we think of it as ultra important, and I think of the people in the world, you probably think of it even more important. The safety aspects of the Corvette, and when you cage one, it doesn't look like it's fit for a luxury mammal.
not luxurious mammals don't fit in the Corvette as well as probably a BMW. So we have I've started a thread on Corvette forum. It's specifically called "Will this seat fit in a Corvette?" And it's pages and pages and pages of people, and I got like a glossary and an index. So you can look and see what seat has fit in a Corvette, because it is not a super duper long list. It has a pretty narrow inner cockpit. Depending on how your genetic makeup is, maybe if you're wider up top, you can spill over that seat, but you can't put like a 530 millimeter wide Recaro seat in a Corvette. You're pretty much stuck like 450 millimeters or less, which is not super wide. But if you can get the seat in there, like we have guys who are 6'7", I think is maybe the tallest guy that I have in a Corvette, and very specifically, I say me because we invented this super duper low, strong seat mount to get the seat actually touching the balsa wood floor. So you lean that thing back enough. I mean, I can get some really tall guys in there, but 300-pound dudes, that I don't know. There's too many of those guys that are racing Corvettes. There's a couple, but yeah.
So is it a little bit more friendly to the long of leg or the long of torso?
The long of leg, so I'm 6 feet, and like on my C8, with a helmet on, I'm already at the headliner. So drops me down 4 inches just by making that easy enough change. But yes, longer of leg is easier to accommodate than longer of torso.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
And the height, you don't have to worry about like lowering a floor, making any kind of alterations there or anything.
No, you can. So there's a balsa wood floor, a C5 and C6 that's above the actual floor brackets, about 3/4 of an inch thick. So if you're like 6'6" and super long of torso, I have had some guys actually take out the balsa wood floor, like chip it out with a chisel essentially to get it all down to the flat plate that's actually on the bottom of the floor plan, and that gets you another 3/4 of an inch if you need it. And some guys do. I'm talking to a guy through it right now, as a matter of fact, via email, how to get that done. He's 6'5", I think. So there's an extra 3/4 inch if you have to get it, but beyond that, you're not going any lower. You can't really build the floor plan down if you needed to.
So chiseling or sanding balsa wood is the equivalent of the Miata seatectomy, huh?
I suppose it is.
It's when you take all the foam out of your seat and just start slamming it to the ground.
Gotcha.
So cool. So if we're looking for, like, somebody calls you up and says, Mark, I know you know your stuff. I want to go fast. And by fast, I mean flipping fast, or perhaps a different word that starts with F.
Fast.
Yes. Fast. Kind of like the Def Leppard song from long ago. Almost the same. Are you still going to keep them in the C6?
Yeah, for sure. Because what are you going to do to go faster? If you're going to get a C7, and in the end, all race cars, as far as I'm concerned, kind of going back to Vicky's point about strengths and weaknesses, what is a race car? It's a motor. It is lightweight. It is big tire. It is aerodynamic. And there's really not much more that's that. The C7 is not any more of those things than the C6. Put the biggest engine you can, put the widest tire you can. The double wishbone suspension is as advanced as it gets. That's what all factory race cars tend to use. So what more could you do? I mean, you could spend $250,000, go to my good friends at Phoenix Performance, and Andrew Acolante, he'll build you the sickest C7 GT2 car they can come up with. And that's about what it's going to cost you, because they have to get rid of all the factory electronics, because none of those electronics will play nice with anything. So you're going sequential transmission and big motor and things of that nature. At $250,000, you can get a ridiculously fast C7 GT2 car, but you can also do that for $100,000 C6. So yes, it's a lot of money, but do you need to spend more than double just to get into a nicer C7 platform? I mean, sure, you can, but do you need to? Certainly not.
So one thing we haven't talked about yet, and I think kind of at my fault, because we end up always stealing the parts off the Corvette for this particular area and putting them onto other cars. the brakes on a Corvette, any
Mhm.
issues there? Any things to look out for? Because we always put them on our cars because they're always, awesome.
Because they're better than other things. Yeah, I mean, again, they're great for 90% of drivers who are driving at 90% or less. Not so less so on the C5, the C6 Grand Sport that we're talking about. That came with 6-piston Brembos, which again, at the very bleeding edge of performance. First thing I do with any car, any Corvette that I have, I had my C8 on order, and 9 months before I even ordered the car, I had AP Racing Radical calipers waiting on the shelf for that thing. Because for me personally, unless I'm 100% confident in my brakes, I just can't be fast. If I'm going to put my foot on the brake and say, I wonder what's going to happen, that never translates to me being confident or comfortable or fast,
For sure.
and therefore consistent. So, I mean, yes, I mean, when you're building a race car, you're not going to leave the factory C5, C6 calipers on there. If you're going to go for the best, which is what I put my life on is AP Racing. So that's what we offer, and that's what I've always used. So going to the APs, while they're expensive, it's generally I've never heard of anybody regretting putting AP racing brakes on their car. So again, at that bleeding edge of performance, aftermarket big brake racing, motorsport grade stuff is recommended, but you can go a hell of a long ways with the factory C5, C6 stuff as well.
So
less so on the C5. Like the C5, the rotors are small. The calipers they just want 2 big piston calipers. The C5 stuff you got to replace a lot sooner than you might the C6, Z6, or Grand Sport.
So, in the interest of, fanning the flames on everything on the internet, what brake pad is your particular preference for? Because everybody always agrees. So we might as well get you on the list.
Those are them fighting words. Now I've used every brake pad, and we wanted to name a brand specifically that I enjoy.
Well, I mean, but what do you use? Because it fits your driving style, and these things are very personal. Because I hear people say, "Oh, I love this pad, and I've tried them, and they suck," but
Right.
not they're just not what I want.
On my C5 race car, it was fortuitous because NASA has a Raybestos contingency, and honestly, had they not, I probably never would have tried Raybestos because I don't really know them as a super duper high end motorsport brake thing. But if you're paying for pads and suddenly you say, wait a minute, they had a great contingency. Like you come in first, second, or third, I think, maybe even fifth. Sometimes it gives you a set of brake pads. Like, great, that's $350 just for almost showing up and doing an okay job. So I switched to Raybestos on the C5, which my C5 was 3,000 pounds with me in it. So super duper light. And I really loved the Raybestos that they had at the time because it was more like an on-off switch, but for whatever reason in my style and that lightweight car, I really liked. So it lasted a long time at a super high coefficient of friction. So you touched it and it was like the anchors got thrown out. Tried those same pads on my C8 and didn't like them at all, So
right.
As we all know, there's a bajillion different options. I've tried everything from Hawk, Paget, G-Lock, Carbotech, Cobalt, Raybestos, obviously. For me personally, and we plug for myself and plug for these guys, I sell them now as well as G-Lock pads. I mean,
Really?
there's
Okay.
maybe some better performing pads. There's maybe some cheaper pads. There's maybe some longer lasting pads. But for me, in the sweet spot of cost, performance, pad longevity, rotor longevity, I've switched to G-Lock exclusively on my Corvette stuff personally. But yeah. So I mean, again, everybody's got their thing. Porsche guys won't run anything but Paget, right?
I am aware.
Some people will say, EBC is the best pad ever, and I've never heard of anybody who's using EBC pad who likes it in a Corvette, but like for freaking Mazda Protege, they're popular, whatever, So
yeah. And then it depends on whether you're doing sprint racing or endurance racing, and
Sure.
blah 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 blah. And that's why whenever we see the flame war start up over brake pads, I'm sitting there going, guys, you're talking about 2 totally different cars. One of you does sprint racing, one of you does endurance racing. You're never going to agree on this.
I just encourage people to try whatever it is they want to try. Try everything, and then they're all good options, and they've all got their place, and it's really a personal thing. So for what to tell you what I love, you may absolutely hate. But,
yeah. Well, there's somebody else that's a very dear friend of ours, and he's a strong proponent of a race pad that I hate.
Really?
But he drives the same car as we do, and it's just I can't stand that car. I mean the brake pads, but it just never feels like it's stopping me. It feels like it's kind of having a conversation about, negotiation with the wheels as opposed to a command. And
Right.
I want a command. I'm like, I want to stop now, not when
Mhm.
you're done talking about it. But anyway,
And that, yeah, if you're being specific, like the Corvette ABS, no, not a lot of people are in love with. So, right. So the way that I have to get into the brakes may not be the same way you get into the brakes in a Miata or an E46 BMW. And so
mhm.
then us Corvette guys, there's some specific compounds that are very, very popular with the Corvette, which again, nobody would ever use in a Miata or a Porsche. So it really is platform specific,
For sure. And
Mhm.
you did walk me into my next little line. There is this, I guess the best way to put it is an internet fear
Mhm.
over all GM cars because they automatically go into ice mode or hard. I believe the official term is hard pedal mode. Is that,
Ice mode's the one that gets thrown around more than the hard pedal, but
yeah.
yes. Mhm.
Is that conspicuous in the Corvette? Never happened or
It's
somewhere
so
in
it's so
between?
it's funny. Like lots of people complain about that, and a lot of people experience it. I've experienced it a couple times, and talking with really knowledgeable dudes at the super high end race car level. Like again, I mean, I know a lot of what I know, and 95% of my customers are track guys, race guys. If you want to go a little bit beyond there, guys who are building $300,000, $400,000 cars. You're talking, the Aquilantes at Phoenix. You're talking Louis Gigliotti at LGR. These are the guys who have the highest, the most motorsport experience using crazy $15,000 Bosch ABS systems. But Lewis and I have talked about this a lot, and some of the old school, some of the OG C5 guys. We have a group on Facebook called the C5 Mafia. There's only 72 people in it, and we don't let anybody in. And it's just like dudes who are that's all they do is live and breathe and race Corvette stuff. But really, the way around the ice mode thing, what the computer really doesn't like is a jab. It does not like you to jab the brakes. You can get up to really hard brake pressure really fast, but you better do it smoothly. If you stand on that thing and stab the brake pedal, that's what induces ice mode. And it is rather alarming when it happens, and you don't necessarily know what to do. I had it happen once in my C8 at Palmer coming into turn one, a little shoot thing where you're kind of going up the hill.
That's not good.
It wasn't too good. It scared the crap out of me. I was like, oh, good, because my C8, has all has tons of data and that's being read through, the onboard computers, and you export that to a software called Pi Cosworth, which is free but super duper high end, race car stuff. It's like, good, I can finally look at all my individual brake pressures in the ABS computer and see what's really freaking this thing out. And there's nothing. It didn't show me anything out of the ordinary. I was getting ready to get on the internet and be a hero, showing the smoking gun about what the wheel speed sensors did and what the ice mode actually looks like with the brake pressure graph, and there was none of that. But the goddamn car wasn't stopping. Again, that's still stuff I'm sort of getting used to on the C8, given it's a lot heavier. So, but yes, it is better. Every generation gets better. The C7 is less prone to ice mode. The C8 less than the C7, but it still requires a fast but even application of that brake pedal. If you stab the thing, you're gonna piss it off.
Yeah. And the last thing you want to do, especially if you're in the usually when you want to stab the brakes means you really, really need the brakes. And the last thing you need is for the brakes to say, no, no, thank you.
I'm so close. Let me go a little bit deeper. Let me stand on the brakes a little faster and harder. And that's just not what it wants to do,
Yeah.
So keep your head about you a little bit.
Yep,
Mhm.
indeed. Okay, so C6 is the optimal one. What does let's assume that somebody says, "Hey, I really like a mid-engine car." What does the C8 do relative to the C6? Obviously, it being newer, it's going to cost a good chunk more, and it's probably still being developed, even though it's a few years old by now.
Sure.
Is there a significant difference there, or is it?
It's significant. Yeah. It's
Really?
yeah, for me, it was a lot of fun because, I don't know, I was in the hospital, not knowing what I was going to do. Am I ever going to drive a car again? I'm talking early days. I'm talking waking up out of a coma, saying, "What the hell am I going to do?" Quickly I realized I was going to survive, and I desperately wanted to get back in a car. So that had been wiped from my transom, so to speak. So it's like, well, what am I going to get into? If I get into this is 2021, so the C8 had just come out, really.
Mhm.
If I get it back into a C5, C6, or even a C7, I'm not going to be racing wheel to wheel. I'm probably going to be bored because I know that platform really, really well. And I really wanted, I wanted to learn something different. Like one of the things I like the most about race car driving and racing in general is that there's always something more to learn. And I gotten pretty far on that C5 platform, and it wasn't really going to interest me to hop back in another C5 and just do the same thing, right? So then I got really excited about the C8 because they're putting that engine. So fast forward to when I actually got the car and got it on track, putting that engine in the back changes everything. And a lot of guys who are Corvette guys don't warm up to the C8 because they've got this idea that trail braking doesn't exist. You slam on the brakes, you then transition to gas before you even get to the apex, and that's a common Corvette way to drive things, which of course is not the way to drive a car fast, but a lot of guys do it anyway. However, you do that in a C8 and it just won't do it. Like my dad, who's God bless him, is 74 years old, but he's a tough guy to teach new tricks. So he had a C7 Grand Sport at Sebring, driving like a Corvette dude, and he got a C8 and he was 3 seconds slower in the C8 because he's lifting up the front end trying to put on power before he's got to the apex, and the car is just understeering, and it's traction lights are coming on. Car doesn't like that. So Corvette baked in a bunch of electronics to try and get the car around the track quickly if you're not driving optimally. But if you're driving it optimally and doing what a car wants to do, which is break it down to the apex, get it to rotate. The thing's got so much rear grip, it just points in the direction you want to go, and you stand on it, and it takes off like a rocket. So it's that weight bias that allows the mid-engine C8 to rotate much more freely and then point in the right direction and launch it out of the corner. So that's really been the coolest challenge for me was, it's different enough that it takes a different hand to go fast in a C8 versus a front-engine Corvette.
Mm.
So
sorry, go ahead, Bill.
No, go ahead. You got an and. I got it.
But so you're asking, hey, I want to spend a lot of money. I want to go really fast. For me, the coolest thing. So all of those, we're talking a 20-year newer car. My C5 was 2004. My C8's 2023. We've put our mark on it enough at this point that I now my C8 street car, which I take my son to school on Monday through Friday, is faster at like New Jersey Thunderbolt than my C5 race car. You know what I mean? And thing's got AC and a full interior, and it weighs 3,700 pounds. So technology and engineering has come far enough in 20 years that yes, it is an advantage to have the latest and greatest thing, and really be fast as a track day car without a lot of compromise. So yes, if you've got the coin, you want to step into a C8 and make it really fast, you can make it pretty much as fast as a C6 race car and still be a street car.
So what are you going to do? You're going to run it and then give it its next best life?
Meaning what?
Well, I mean, since you got one, you're going to run it until you can't run it and then flip it over into a race car? That's next best life.
Well, I would make it a race car, but again, we can talk about it, but nothing on that. Like that car won't run if a freaking airbag, everything talks to everything in that car electronically. Start unplugging anything, you get all kinds of warnings. So where we talked about briefly, the C7 needs X number of things to become a race car. The C8 needs much more things to become a race car. Talking, $250,000 to basically rip out everything in the car except for the frame and the body panels and the control arms, and replacing everything. To make it like a real balls to the wall race car. So
what you're saying is our future down the road, we're going to be having some challenges.
Well, if you win that lottery, you should be okay. But
there we go.
Sort of that, I don't have a good plan for it myself.
Yeah.
So to go back just a little bit, and I just want to make sure I'm clear, and maybe the audience, is the traditional Corvette driver racer driving that way because the car allows them to drive that way, or does the C8 driving technique, is that more proper in quotes? I guess I don't know how to ask the question.
The way to drive a C8, if that's what we're asking, right, requires you to drive the car more properly. I think, look, I'm a Corvette guy, and I know every joke there is about Corvette guys: gold chains, New Balances, jean shorts. A lot of that's true. Those stereotypes are fun and they're true. Listen, you've been to the track enough. You've seen plenty of guys in 700 horsepower Corvettes. I'm sure you've gotten plenty of point buys from them in your Miatas because they're slow in the turns. Why are they slow? And they're slow in the turns because they want all that power. They want to put their foot down a straight line, and hey, that's it's freedom, baby. That's America. Let's put our foot down in a straight line.
Yep.
But yeah, I think the Corvette, being its wide of tire, it's pretty well balanced. Like you can make a lot of mistakes. You don't have to extract the highest level of driving performance to make the car go really fast around a racetrack. So I see it all the time. I got to talk guys out of getting onto slicks way before they should have. They don't drive the car properly. They're not maintaining a proper amount of slip angle to get the full grip out of the tire. Anyway, why are you putting slicks on this car just to slow down your driving progression? So I think that, I don't want to say it runs rampant, but it's, I don't know, it seems to be a little bit more indicative of a Corvette driver to take that approach to driving. We know the car is fast. I'm going to drive this fast car and spend a little bit less time than maybe they should thinking about how they can improve their performance. So,
yeah,
gotten past your ego like I did years ago. So, look, I need to learn a lot. I'm pretty fast. How do I become really fast? And that's when you get driver coaching and guys that get in your car and look at your data. Mm-hmm. And once you've got to that point, you finally realize the proper way to drive a car is to, again, trail breakdown, get the thing rotated, and finally, the C8 does that really, really well, which I think was the last part of your question.
Yeah. So the performance of the car is such that it covers up for some sins of the past, and to a point.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sure.
We share the same the feeling, because your story reminded me of one time we were at pit race and there was a driver there in HPD2 with aero slicks in their Corvette, and I'm sitting there going, "You're in HPD2."
Right.
Okay.
Right. My people start at different places than Miata people.
Yeah, I was like, okay, you
right.
go. Yep. All right. I was sitting there, in my head going, don't want to be the instructor. Don't want to be the instructor. Yeah. So anyway,
what are some of the main things that, like, okay, if you start out, you're new to all this, what are some of the things you're like, these are some of the things you must do when you're building a Corvette? These are some of the changes you must make.
When I give people the short list, and again, this question gets asked all the time because it's super popular and it is super fast, right? So the old wise guys like myself say, you don't need to do much, but what do you need to do? You need to flush the fluids. You want to flush the brake fluid. I generally encourage in it, put on fresh brake pads, of course, race pads, ideally. Stainless steel brake lines are always a good thing to put in every car, especially in a Corvette, because the way they're constructed, they tend to balloon a little bit more. I haven't driven a Corvette with stock brake lines in 1,000 years, so I kind of forget what it's like to go out there and drive a stock car. But truthfully, changing your fluids, making sure your tires are in good shape. We talked about a little bit in the beginning. There's not a long list of things that have to happen to get that Corvette on the racetrack, Vicki.
Yeah. I think the thing that's surprising is given the performance, the running costs for a Corvette aren't crazy. Like, I don't think there's a better value at that level of performance out there.
Yeah. I think we said that 3 years ago. I think we talked about smiles per dollar, and between a Miata and a Corvette,
miles per dollar.
As like performance envelopes, they're drastically different. But really, when you think about performance per dollar, I don't think there's anything higher. There's a higher rubric than the Corvette as far as performance per dollar. And again, at a track day level, the thing runs forever. And it's not until you get to that last percent that you really got to start throwing some money at it. And all race cars break eventually when they're at that level. But guys who just got to put some gas and some oil and some tires in a car, the Corvette's probably going to be the easiest to live with on a track day level for sure.
Yeah, it's always talked about for grid life. The one of the complaints is the car is so understressed. It just it doesn't,
especially in grid life, because you can only have like 240 horsepower. So
yeah.
The way we tune those things, we use the throttle table, so it's not like you can put a restrictor in it anymore. You basically just tell the computer, like, hey, when my foot is down to the floor, only give me 42% throttle. So it keeps your fuel ratios in a really good place, and it makes your power band completely flat. So you've got full throttle at like 2,000 RPM, so you got a ton of torque down low. But then you're basically just pulling your foot off the gas when your foot's all the way down. So the thing will run forever in grid life trim for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then there's Ferris.
Yes. What do you want to say about Ferris?
Well, I don't understand how he is able to drive at those rates, and B, I don't understand how the car is able to do it at those rates, and he does this kind of, solo-ish.
Yeah, solo-ish. again, and we break everything down to its core. What is a car? It's tires and a frame and some suspension and a motor. So, and the Corvette's really good at that. How much of that? I mean, yes, there's a lot of Corvette parts on Ferris's Corvette, but there's not a factory part on that thing, right? That is, yes, he's solo-esque, but he's got some really good team. He's got two cars, right? He's got one he just finished building. He's got this one that lives over in Japan or whatever, 1,200 horsepower, twin turbo, sequentials, all that stuff. A lot of it was done G-Speed and Louis Gigliotti and those guys. Still a Corvette, sure, but so far removed from anything that you're going to go out and buy. Yes, I mean the body panels are the same, but you should never look at Ferris's times or cars. Like, ooh, how can I do that? Because you can, but it's going to take cubic dollars. The thing runs for 3 laps, then he replaces a turbo. I mean, yeah, it's great. It's super duper fast, but reliable? No,
not so much.
Yeah.
Do you know any of the times? Because Miss Vicky's eyes are going to pop if we ever say one.
I don't know his times like locally. I know you guys are in the Northeast like I am. Like in Coda's like, I don't know, 202 or something ridiculous. But if you don't have a reference, then you wouldn't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I bet you that car would do 140s at Watkins Glen pretty easily. It's like a GLTM. I don't know. I think Road Atlanta, you got down to like 115, 116, something obscene. So otherworldly performance.
So Miss Vicky, just for reference, not that we are the pinnacle of racing, we were in the 150s at Road Atlanta. He ran a 115.
Right, something like that.
And that's a tricky track.
I would have diamonds coming out of my butt if I ever tried to drive a 115. I don't care what I'm in.
But at the same time, when we were driving that, we were just starting out too.
There you go.
I don't think it matters. We were driving a Chevy S10.
In an S10, yeah.
S10 truck?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. You should have seen us. We were like this moving chicane going down that big back straight. It was quite funny.
Was it a Lemons or Champ Car thing?
Yeah, it was a Lemons thing. It was like 34 degrees the entire weekend and raining. So it was.
And honestly, I think it was probably our 4th race.
It was.
Ever.
Yeah.
That was a good time.
It was. We were at terminal velocity, I believe, a third of the way down the back straight, and we just sat there for the rest of the straight. It was rather hilarious. But anyway, that was fun. So it seems like it's elective surgery when you're talking about putting a Corvette on track. You can do this, but sometimes you don't need to, and sometimes you just want to.
What do you mean? The act of putting a Corvette on a racetrack, or
well, it's not requiring a whole lot. It's kind of, do you want a little more performance? Do you want a little more bling? Do you want to, be able to say that you have this? But you can kind of take the car out almost as is with the minor exceptions that we talked about already.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course you can, but who the hell does that?
Oh, that's what I'm saying. It's
who do you know that goes to the track and doesn't want to improve something? And I think it's what draws us to the track in the first place. We're relatively competitive people. We want to get out there. We don't want to be the slowest guys. We want to improve. And while all of us can mostly get 90% of the way there with improvement and improving our driving, we all, 90% of us would rather spend money on parts. So Corvette's no different.
There's that.
Totally capable out of the box, doesn't need much, but that's not going to stop anybody from putting tons of stuff on a Corvette to make it a little bit better than it is. And honestly, I had this conversation a lot lately. The C5, C6, like a little bit goes a long way with performance. Like you throw monoballs on that car that we've talked about. I just talked to a guy out of monoballs for a C8 last week. It's like, hey, if you put monoballs on a C5, C6, it transforms the car. Like, it is a different car. It's so much easier to drive. Because of that, it's going to be way faster on track. Whereas the C8, the first thing I did almost was put monoballs in that car. Took it to Lime Rock. I'm like, this is not the drastic change that it was in the C5 and C6. Not until I got to like slicks and Hoosiers on the C8 did it really wake the car up with monoballs. But again, as the models progressed, the money you spend to achieve more performance is lessened. I just think because the cars are so well engineered and designed now that you spend a lot more on a C8 to go not quite as fast as that same money spent on a C5 would increase that lap time. If that makes any sense.
Right. So taking advantage, one last way before we bid you adieu for the evening. It is the season of one lap prep. So have you ever thought about what you would take on the one lap?
think about it every year, and everyone's trying to convince me all the time to go. And of course, if I was going to go, I'd take my C8. You know, why would I not? Why would I not take that? I guess I don't know why I wouldn't. Because my car, specifically my car, the way it's set up is super arrowed out. It's pretty damn streetable. It's got Penske two-way shocks. It takes a big tire. I mean, I guess the guys who win it now are all McLarens with 700 horsepower and stuff like that. But certainly my best shot would be in my Corvette. Myself and my brother would probably co-drive the thing. I don't think this year's. I don't even know. Has it been released yet? The schedule.
Yep.
Where are they approximately?
It's actually a pretty tight schedule for trips. It looks like it's central and going towards northeast, but not northeast. Kind of pit race-ish.
If I can ever know that it's bouncing around the Northeast like exclusively, and I know all of those tracks, I will totally do it.
Yeah, the hard part's getting in.
Yeah.
It sells out pretty quick. So
I know some folks who might be able to sneak me in somewhere.
Might be able to have perhaps a sponsored car by perhaps a company that you're well acquainted with even.
I think probably AMT Motorsport would be happy to chuck a banner on that car. Absolutely.
You might know a guy, one or two. So,
right.
So Mark, if you were, we have some listeners who may be interested in taking their car out on track or just making their car a little bit more performing or maybe just a little bit cooler. How would they get in contact with you?
They can find me through my website, which is amtmotorsport.com. My email, just go ahead and send me an email. It's mark@amtmotorsport.com. I'm very active on all socials, Facebook, Instagram, Messenger, whatever that stuff is. I try to be really available, and it's fun when my customers call or say, hey, some of our stupid YouTube videos have 11 million views. Like, I saw you on YouTube, and I can't believe you're the guy I'm talking to on the phone. Like, I'm just a guy. All right. Don't have any big head here. Yeah, well, talking to customers, that's my favorite part of the job that I do. So if you call and say you want to talk Corvettes, you're going to talk to me. And, that's half my day is spending time talking people into stuff, talking people out of stuff is what I spend more time doing. We make these drop spindles, right? $3,700. And if you want to extract the last tenth of a corner of performance out of a Corvette, you should buy our drop spindles. But I had a guy call the other day. I was like, yeah, I'm in a Z06, C6, Z06. I'm doing 106s at Lime Rock. Do I need your drop spindle? Like, no, don't spend the money on the drop spindle. Let's get you down to the 58s where that car should be, and then I can help you with the drop spindles. And we have a lot of other stuff that we can do. But again, I mean, anybody who knows me, some of my business manager dislikes that I talk people out of trying to buy stuff, but I really just want happy customers. I want people to have fun. I want people to be safe. If I can somehow be a part of that, then that gives me that's the best part of my job is not trying to take your money, but to try and make you have a good time on track and get in the Corvette platform. And then when you want to go faster, believe me, I'm here, but we don't.
Miles for miles.
100%, Vicki.
So I'm thinking we take Mark and we have him at one apex of the triangle with his Corvettes. And then at the other apex of the triangle for Smiles for Miles, we have Miss Vicki and her Spec Miata. And then the third apex of the triangle is Spec Panther, Crown Vics.
I hear the notion's gaining traction. I understand.
That's right. It's from my friends who've tried it but yet to invite me. Hint, hint. It's supposed to be just a big old fluffy Miata, like the Beagle of the Miata family, and it's just huge. So
they use those at a Summit Point for all their training or something like, or is just pick up speed.
Yep. Nothing like going on around the track with a cop car. It's always good.
Why not? They're built for it. They're built to be robust.
Exactly. Yep. And they are made for luxury mammals, so there is that.
Perfect.
So
fascinating.
Thank you for coming back on, Mark. You're one step closer to the 5-time club and getting your honorary membership.
Let's keep the magic. Let's keep the journey going, then.
We can do that. We can do that. And
it is so good seeing you again.
I was not in a great spot. I was only 5 months out of my accident last time, so I hadn't had any. I've had 20 surgeries since then. I'm done with therapy. I'm done with surgeries. Everything's working so much.
Looking great now. To our audience, he's in there moving all his digits. They all looking pretty great.
It's sort of like a medical miracle. The fact that my hand was burned as bad as it is, and I still have all of my fingers that work as well as they do. I mean, I had fantastic surgeons throughout my 3 years. So in a good spot.
Definitely drivable.
Well, speaking of which, when we did have you on earlier, it was relatively new. Is the at that point you were saying that there was no chance of you driving a stick again? Is that still the case, or?
No, no, I drive sticks all the time. As a matter of fact, so I think that was in January. Then by April, my buddy Adrian, who owns Fast Auto in Queens, he's the one who pulled me out of the car, or one of the guys who pulled me out of the car. He gave me his C6. He gave me his C6 Grand Sport to drive around while I was waiting for my C8 to show up. So I was driving his C6 race car. By April, by right around the 1 year anniversary, I got his car back at Lime Rock, and I kept that for the summer. And I was driving that, but that's a stick, yeah. So I didn't know what my hand was going to do in regards
Right.
to a stick.
It looks great. I mean,
Yeah.
it looks amazing.
It looks
for
like
everything. Yeah, for everything you went. Listen, you know what? Everything that's on your body's a story. That's how I look at anything. When I look at people, I'm like, there's a story to tell, you know?
certainly is that.
But are you just, test driving? Are you entertaining, or are you actually getting behind the wheel again?
No, I mean, I'm not racing wheel to wheel, and I probably won't. My son was 6 when that happened. Was a bit of a, I think if my wife had her druthers, she probably would have been perfectly fine with me not getting back on a racetrack, ever again. But it's just such a part of who I am that, my business is Corvettes, obviously. So no, I mean, we got the Corvette, and I track that, and I instruct in that, and I do time trials in that. But wheel to wheel racing, while I miss the hell out of it, I don't think I'll be competing wheel to wheel anytime in the foreseeable future.
You did, there's one thing that you said that absolutely resonated with us, and we share it, because sometimes people get stupid on the track. They just get stupid. They forget where they are. They forget who they are, and
They get a little misty.
Yeah, they do get a misty. And you said at one point that the risk versus reward of what you're doing, and how much do you want to push? Because there's nobody in the stands. You're not going to go into any kind of club that is going to make any money. So you really got to think about what you're doing. And that's what we kind of say to people when they get kind of misty. It's like, what are you doing? What is the end reward for you? Bragging rights? You're not getting any money. You're getting a homemade trophy, if anything, and maybe a sticker, but let's be
I'll go buy you
honest.
a trophy so you don't get hurt.
Yeah, let's be honest. We're all out here having a good time, so don't be stupid, you moron. You know?
Time, but then, as we know, people get on the bleeding edge of performance and competition, and I've been guilty myself. I mean, not so much in the case, but I've made some questionable moves. Like, oof, I'm glad that one worked. And why?
Yeah.
So I've always tried to kind of keep that in mind all through my racing progression. Sometimes bad shit just happens.
Yeah.
It does. Well,
But
it is
words
very
of wisdom.
good. Very good to see
Absolutely
you
words
doing
of
as well
wisdom.
as you are, though.
Well, I appreciate it.
And we will bother you again.
Absolutely.
You do. Be here.
Yeah.
All right, we got
Thank
more.
you.
We got more Fast and Furious questions. We never know what we could do to you.
Ready.
Thank you, sir.
Mark, thank you so much.
All right, guys. Thank you.